Right, it's time for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Lettice Bromovsky, and have I said that right? Bromovsky?
Bromovsky.
Bromovsky, very good.
Well,
I'm close. Political commentator, and Lydia Lynn, who's a student at UCL studying for a master's degree in legal and political theory. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Thank you very much. This is your first time here with us. Just very quickly, a master's degree in legal and political theory. That sounds terribly clever. Is it good?
We try to be clever, but yes, it's good fun.
Great, good. Okay, well, I want to talk about a number of things this morning, if we can. The big story, this is in the Telegraph, this is about Keir Starmer. We talked yesterday about this leaked dossier of Labour policies and whether they're testing the water. But yesterday, we talked about the fact that Labour making working from home a legal right. We also talked about the fact that they may change the rules about private schools. They want to make it easier to strike. And then this morning I read that Keir Starmer's latest ruse is that he wants to give millions of EU citizens, EU nationals, the vote. So essentially there are 3.4 million EU nationals in Britain. They have settled status. On top of that, 2.6 million have pre-settled status. And so the idea is that he would allow them to then therefore vote in the general election. On top of that, he also wants 16 and 17-year-olds to vote as well. There are 1.4 million of those. So 7.4 million people that Keir Starmer thinks will vote Labour. So, Lettice, where do you stand on this?
I think it's deeply concerning, to be honest. Obviously, this is just in the early stages of it, but as you laid out there, that would increase the franchise by about 8%. That's a huge increase, one of the biggest we've seen in a while. And ultimately, I see it as a quite cynical way for really him just to increase the Labour vote, because realistically, we know that many migrants who settle here and many young people often vote more on the left. That's just ultimately how it goes.
And Lydia, are we being deeply cynical here? Is it actually that Keir Starmer believes that these people do have a right, if they have settled status here, that therefore they should be allowed to vote in the general election? Is it, or is he testing the waters, do you think?
No, I think it is a very interesting proposal, and maybe my concerns, you know, they aren't as strong as yours. I'm not sure whether it would increase Labour's vote, because I know that a lot of young people do feel let down by Labour, that maybe Labour is not the party of the youth. The ones that I've spoken to.
Really? Definitely. And so when you talk to younger people, because I think Lettice is right, certainly in my experience, that younger people, we know you're at your most left-wing when you are younger. As you get older and
pay tax.
And gnarled and paid tax like Dr. Renée and I, you tend to change in your views. So if young people aren't voting Labour, who do they vote for?
You know, there are lots of discussions. I mean, I have friends, for example, that say not voting is as much of a statement as voting.
And how do you counter that?
I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I mean, I hear... Can
you just move closer to the mic as well? Sorry. We want to hear your pearls of wisdom.
The friends that I'm thinking of might be from Northern Ireland, for example, where not voting is as much of a statement as choosing between those main parties. And while I do think that young people vote Labour, I don't know how strongly their conviction lies with them.
You see, I think this is a policy that will have been whispered in Keir Starmer's ear by Alistair Campbell et al., who have their eye firmly focused on returning to Europe and coming back into the fold. And this is the way to do it.
Interestingly, what I think this actually is Keir Starmer has ruled out ever making a pact with the SNP, and they obviously brought in voting for 16
that's because he sees that actually Labour can do well in Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. But he's ruled out forming a coalition with them. However, we know the Lib Dems have a strong policy of proportional representation, and so ultimately I see if there was a Lib Lab pact coming in later on, it could be that they would join over this point of proportional representation.
So this is interesting, Lydia. When you John Curtis, who is often a regular on this show, Professor Sir John Curtis, he's the polling expert, he says migrants and young people were far more likely to be Labour supporters. They're concentrated in cities and in the south of England, and also they'll be opposed to Brexit, and that's the whole point. Isn't this actually what this is about? This is about, remember, the great blob that we talked about yesterday wants dynamic alignment with Europe, so therefore it's so much easier to go back in. Actually, I think at the end of this, that Keir Starmer says, oh no, I believe in Brexit, but actually he's a Remainer. He wants us to rejoin Europe, and this is another way of doing this.
It's interesting to say that this might be because Keir Starmer wants us to rejoin the EU, whether he thinks that would be popular or genuinely holds that belief.
Does he believe that, or do you think he's dangling a carrot?
I can't see us rejoining the EU.
Why?
I don't think that we would make that kind of U-turn, to be honest.
We've never left, really.
That's what I was thinking. Ultimately, the Brexit we were promised in 2016 just hasn't come to fruition. What we've seen in the last week with the bonfire, the U-turn of the 4,000.
We decided it was a bin fire.
But, very apt. But it just hasn't happened. We haven't seen anything happen over these last 7 years.
Lydia.
I would have to ask. I'm not really sure what the Brexit that we were promised in 2016
it was taking back control of our money, our laws and our borders. So in terms of money, we have the highest inflation that we've seen. We've got prices skyrocketing. What was the other? Taking back control of our money? Laws. Well, we don't seem to have any control over our laws because we haven't had the bonfire. We've got a bin fire.
And we still have the ECJ.
And indeed, and we haven't taken back control of our borders because we've annexed Northern Ireland. I mean, 2 million people talking about apathy. No wonder they don't vote, because actually we've abandoned them.
I'm not sure that we could say that we've abandoned them. I think that the policy towards Northern Ireland has long been neglect, to be quite honest. And I wouldn't say that what you outlined, the sort of take back control motif, was particularly strong in 2016, but it wasn't really clear what that meant. And taking control of our laws, it's a strange thing to say, really, because, as you know, we don't have a constitution as such that we can go to the bookshop and buy and leaf through to truly decipher what those laws are.
But the whole point, and I was an MEP, I was in Brussels, so the whole point about this, and the reason that I was so incensed by where we were, was the fact is this is a sovereign democratic country, and therefore it is right and proper that Westminster makes our laws, and not to be subsumed into this amorphous blob in Brussels that basically dictated laws. And yesterday, actually, you and I were talking about this. I was saying, well, we could have opted out. You couldn't. They were EU directives, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So we couldn't opt out, but we could now, but we're not going to, because it's much easier to realign yourself, even if we don't in name go back in, when you've got all of those laws on the books.
And where do you stand on this?
I stand on the fact that I don't think anything's really happened since we left in 2016. I do agree with you, and looking particularly at the laws, if we now backtrack on the sunset clause, which was put in to put pressure on, if that pressure's now gone, when are we going to be getting rid of some of these laws?
That's a really interesting point, and I keep making this. They say, well, there is an argument to say, OK, let's look at all of these laws, because there are a lot of them, 4,800. Now, there are two ways of doing this. Either we go through every single law and then work out which ones we ditch, or do we ditch all of them with the sunset clause that you mentioned and then add in the laws that we think are right? Because the 600 they're getting rid of are about bendy bananas and things that are actually relatively rubbish.
Might I press you on 2 points?
You might.
I have to pick up the bendy bananas point.
OK, I'm being rhetorical, but yes, carry on. All right.
And the second point I wanted to press you on, you said you felt that it was right and proper that Westminster should make our laws. Does that also apply to devolved powers, or
No, so devolved assembly should make laws within the constitution that's been given to them. So, for example, the Scottish Parliament can only make certain laws and we've also seen examples where Westminster has not given permission for that to happen. So, but it's important that we, within the Union, decide our laws, isn't it?
I think, we all feel, if we're totally honest about it, that some laws are, arbitrary, right? If you're on an empty road, what's the difference between doing 31 and 29?
Or 10, if you're a Labour.
Or 10.
Yeah.
Or 10.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily... I would have concerns about, this kind of take back control and ditch the ECJ. I think that would be potentially harmful to the democratic status of the UK, which is already starting to come under increased pressure. And additionally, I would... what was I going to say? You carry on.
Well, you're doing an admirable defence of the EU. Let's move on and talk about the Conservative Party. This is a really interesting story, I think. So there are a couple of stories this morning. Rishi Sunak apparently forced Boris Johnson to raise the windfall tax on oil and gas giants, allegedly. Boris says he kicked back about it at the time. But also, what I find really interesting is that the Conservative Democratic Organisation holding a conference, or held it yesterday. Now, this hasn't had much coverage at all in the media at all. And these are loyalists to Boris Johnson. There is a real issue here that Rishi Sunak was not elected by the grassroots. They don't like him. And Lord Cruddas was there. He believes the Tories were being moved to a centre-left party or a social democratic party. Nadine Dorries says the Tories don't have an inspirational leader. And Claire very well. The CDO's chief executive said that they are now backing Boris Johnson to return. So just in terms of, do you think the Conservative Party can win with Rishi Sunak?
No, I don't, as my kind of immediate thought, but maybe not for the reasons that you've outlined. I think that Rishi Sunak is unpopular as much as the Tory party is unpopular. We are, as you pointed earlier, we are seeing inflation, the levels of which are unprecedented for most of our lifetimes. And I think most people will blame the Tory party for that. So I'm not sure...
rather than him?
Yes, I think rather than Rishi Sunak. And we've also seen some unpopular leadership from Boris Johnson as well.
So much at this point that if he did keep going this way, Labour would only get a hung parliament, is what the experts are saying.
So do you see Rishi Sunak as an inspirational leader?
I wouldn't go that far. Let's calm down a little bit. But I would say that he's a steadfast, sort of headstrong leader in a way that we've seen the chaos of Boris Johnson. This is what we need. And to your question of,
do you think he was chaotic?
No, sorry, but Boris Johnson, Liz Truss.
Was Truss chaotic, though?
I think they were both chaotic.
Why?
I think they were chaotic because they did not bring, Liz Truss particularly here, they did not bring the country along with them on their policies, which terrified everyone and caused the chaos, which the Conservative Party is still reeling from. And this Conservative Democratic organisation, they are actually going to be the ultimate downfall of the party because they are infighting between themselves when we have bigger issues going on, cost of living, and I think it's just embarrassing, really, to see so many of them out there. I was watching the videos of it, and it looked quite empty. It didn't look so full in the seats watching them, and
interesting.
I just thought the whole thing was—it's just a fanfare.
So as much younger people than not you, obviously, just me. So where do you see? So the general election. How do you think young people will vote now? You talked about the apathy for Labour. You've talked about the Conservative Party ripping itself to pieces. Is this the beginning of something different? How do you think young people might vote?
I think for a long time it has been rumoured that this might be the beginning of the end and that real change is needed. But I believe that young people on the whole will probably vote for Labour, not because they are ideologically aligned with Keir Starmer, because,
because that's the system.
Yeah, because the choice is not meaningful.
Or do you think the two-party system is over?
I'd like to think it might be. I'd like to think that this might be the end of the two-party system.
Well, so it's really interesting. How will young people vote?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm going to need to see more of the policies when it gets close to the time, what they're putting out there at the moment.
Is it policy-driven, or is it actually charismatic leaders that win elections?
Well, I think for a vast majority of people it will be just a charismatic leader, someone who does have that communication. But really, it is important what they're putting forward because it will be defining of the future.
Yeah, see, I think this is interesting. I think in younger people, where Corbyn won was his policies that really did appeal to young people. They really thought that was a fairer approach, whether we agree or not, but they did. I have this discussion with my son all of the time, who thinks the country was absolutely done out by not having Corbyn, because they saw that as a fairer way for everyone. So I do think policies do matter.
So you're saying that as you get older, you become less ideological and therefore you're more likely to go for a charismatic candidate. Interesting. Let's talk about something that's really important for young people, which is trying to find somewhere to live. Because it's increasingly difficult to get on the housing ladder. You have to find ridiculous... It is a nightmare, and I mean, it was hard enough when we did it, but that was 3,000 years ago, and now it's really, really difficult. I saw this story this morning. Over 100 flats are about to be built in East London. Did you see this? Basically, you're not going to have your own kitchen. So they're basically they get 135 shared living rooms. So these are studio flats. You're going to have your own bedroom, a kitchenette, so I assume a sink, a living area, but a bathroom as well. But you share a kitchen, you share a dining area, and you share a laundry room. The rooms are 21 square metres. Isn't that a hall of residence?
That is literally, that is a university hall of residence. It sounds like a nightmare.
But would you buy one? But,
no.
Oh, no. Why not? Why not? It gets you on the ladder.
A shared, the shared spaces. We all remember university. You're still at university. The shared spaces are a nightmare.
Why are they?
Stealing of food, mouldy food, things
Well,
left
hang on a minute. You've got your own kitchen, so at least you won't have the mouldy food and all that stuff. That I used to have everything nicked. But what about that? Would you buy if it was a way to get on the ladder?
You know, I think there are bigger issues here than mouldy food and people eating your jam. Your home should be somewhere where you are safe and you feel that you can express yourself freely, and to have to share that with others and potentially even more. I think that, you know, this is something that we could get really angry about, but actually it's something that personally I just feel really sad about, because this is a result of the privatisation of the housing stock, kind of deregulation of landlords.
But it's actually even deeper than that, David. I actually think this is, if we're thinking about health in the future and obesity, this is encouraging people who don't want to go to the shared kitchen to just press their app on their phone and order in something from McDonald's or Kentucky and eat badly rather than cook for themselves.
Well, you've got a shared kitchen.
A shared kitchen, but if they don't want to go to the shared kitchen because someone might be using the stove, you know, we've all been in halls of residence.
We have.
Or you don't want to cook in some. We have.
I know.
And, you know, I just think this is more erosion of people actually just living a healthy life.
But to be fair to the developer, they'll say that therefore the price comes down because you're not getting the same sort of thing. I mean, how difficult is it to put an oven in?
Yeah, don't be fair to them.
Also, the price might come down, but I bet you it's still ridiculously high.
Of course it is.
And my worry is for those who have not been to university and never lived in shared accommodation. Suddenly you're being farmed out to what can only be described as a dormitory.
And you don't know about it.
I mean, I don't wish to go into details here, but certainly in the shared laundry, I used to go in and I had no underwear left because it had all been taken out of the laundry. I mean, that would be my nightmare, to go back into all of residence.
Or you get somebody else's underwear in your pile.
Yes, you would.
It's horrible.
I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it? But the point that I think you made very well, which is actually isn't what we should be doing, is building houses on brownfield sites, actually making them affordable and letting young people get on the ladder.
I agree that we should be making affordable housing and prioritising that, but also, you know, for members of our community that are disabled, like living in somewhere like that would be horrific. It would just.
They do have some access rooms, apparently, a few.
I suppose that our disabilities are more than just the physical ones. For those who would OCD find it really difficult to share, that would seriously impact the way that they're feeling, and that's very sad.
It's horrible. It's a multiple occupancy house, isn't it? That's what it is.
It is. And is it a way for the developers to make more money?
And I can tell you, my patients, when I see my patients and they're waiting for housing, the thing they hate most about their temporary housing is sharing everything.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yes.
That's the biggest issue.
They want their own space, all of it.
I don't blame them. So obviously we've got lots to do. Very quickly, I just want to talk about it because time is tight. I want to talk about this, and it is a bit of more of a fun story. The fact is, we talked about the bonfire of Brexit regulations, or the lack of it. The fact is that we're not getting rid of those 4,800. One of the things that I suppose was rather a ridiculous pledge was to bring back pounds and ounces as part of the Brexit thing. So Lettice, would you back bringing back imperial measures?
I feel like I still use them from time to time.
So that's interesting.
They're not gone entirely. Like if I'm baking or something, I know my scales at home still has ounces 100%.
They do both.
Yeah, they do both. So it's not something that I don't use anyway. So I don't see a reason to make a fanfare about bringing it back.
I know how much I weigh in kilos and stone.
I don't.
I know how tall I am in both feet and centimetres.
So I know how much I weigh in kilos, but I cook in pounds.
Very interesting.
I know, but I'm old. That's what happens. So we had a bit of a hybrid system. So interestingly, the rule was passed in 2000 saying the metric system must take precedence in the UK when you refer to weighing of the products. Now we then saw all these metric martyrs and so on who said, no, I'm going to sell bananas in pounds and ounces. Shouldn't we have the right to do both?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lydia?
Yeah, you know, I think it's rather arbitrary, and I wouldn't want to be a kind of...
Stop being a politician. What do you think?
No, what do I think? I couldn't really care.
Yes, I think that's how I feel about it.
If I'm talking to my mum, then I would probably tell her how much I weigh in stone, so
would
she
you?
fully understands what I'm on about. And
because if you said to your mother, I weigh this much in kilos, she wouldn't understand, would she?
we know how much the dog weighs in kilos, but we don't know how much she weighs in pounds. I'll have to go home and measure her.
But isn't that extraordinary that we do, and we still drive in miles an hour, so we haven't ever really actually accepted the metric system,
Well,
have
we do have this sort of hybrid system, but I think our hybrid system works, you know, it's very British.
This is noise. This is noise that we don't need. There are other things to worry about.
No, I totally agree. So let me just finish up by just asking you, who's going to win the next general election?
I think Labour could do it.
Majority government?
Perhaps. If not, I think we could be seeing a deal to be done, but I'm not sure if it would be done in advance.
So, and then Lettice, let me ask you this, just in terms of if we do believe that there is a chasm opening here, how will the smaller parties fare, do you think? Or do you think, and I'm talking about parties like Reclaim, for example, who have got their first member of parliament in Andrew Bridgen, or indeed Reform, or indeed any of the others, the Liberal Democrats, who've done very well in the local elections?
I think we can definitely expect to see the Liberal Democrats doing a lot better. I think parties like Reclaim were hoping to do a lot better in the local election. Actually, in a lot of the seats that they wanted to do better in, did worse, and they didn't get as many councillors in, and in some cases they got none in at all. So I think really we're going to sort of have to wait and see, but Liberal Democrats, I think, will be the one party who will see the most gains.
And so to get the young vote out, you're essentially saying you need to have policies above personality.
Yeah. You need to have policies that actually speak to young people. Things like housing. The Conservatives right now scrapping their housing target. That is not how you're going to be getting young people on board.
And Lydia, to get your vote, what would a political party have to say to you? What are the top priorities?
I think they'd have to provide me with a meaningful choice, not just between these kind of middle grounds, but something that
What's
really
your top issue? Is it crime? Is it policing? Is it the NHS? Is it housing? The economy?
We could be here for a long time, but I think I'd have to choose, you know, really the treatment of those in the NHS, paying them more fairly, recognising that, you know, they have the right to strike, and that should be heard and listened to meaningfully, and not just sort of left to stew.
I bet you've got a comment on that.
I just don't think that's the most important thing right now, and I really don't. I think housing, I think the economy, I think bringing down the cost of living, and I think our sex education of our children, as you know.
Yes, indeed. Well, I know what you think, Dr. Renée. Thank you very much to both of you for coming in, Lettice and Lydia. Very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in for the very first time, and hopefully it wasn't too scary. And that was today's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.